Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People story. Man, I never thought I'd end up in such a big mess just from trying to keep my property private. It all started last summer when I decided to install some security cameras around my place. I know some folks think it's paranoid, but after having some tools go missing from my shed, I wanted a way to catch anyone sneaking around. My next door neighbor Linda had always rubbed me the wrong way. She was just so nosy and entitled, always sticking her nose into other people's business. So when I caught her prowling around my side yard on the cameras one day, I wasn't too surprised. Problem was, she didn't take too kindly to being caught. I marched on over and asked her what on earth she thought she was doing trespassing. "Oh, relax, I was just looking for my stupid cat," she said. "That's no excuse to be wandering where you don't belong," I told her. She got all huffy and indignant, telling me I had no right to record her without permission. I said, "Tough luck, it's my property." That's when Linda threatened to call the cops and tell them I assaulted her if I didn't delete the footage right then and there. Can you believe that load of crap? As if I'd be stupid enough to damage evidence. I just slammed the door in her face and thought that'd be the end of it. Boy, was I wrong. The next day I got an urgent knock at the door. It was two officers wanting to question me about the alleged assault. I kept my cool and explained the whole story, even showing them the perfectly harmless footage of Linda snooping around. They didn't seem too impressed with her bogus claim. As they walked back to their cruiser, one of the cops muttered something about that crazy lady next door again. But Linda wouldn't let it go. For weeks, she kept hounding me, demanding I hand over all my camera recordings as evidence. Every time I told her to shove off, she'd start shouting so the whole block could hear about how I was harassing and spying on her. The crazy accusations just got more and more outlandish. Finally, I'd had enough of her nonsense. I met with my lawyer friend John and told him the whole saga. He laughed his head off at Linda's audacity, but then got real serious. "You need to get a restraining order before this lunatic escalates things," he warned me. Easier said than done, though. The courts were backed up due to COVID, and it took months just to get a hearing. In the meantime, poor Linda just couldn't control herself. She started leaving nasty notes in my mailbox, making prank calls in the middle of the night, even tried to sabotage my car once. The last straw was coming home one day to find she'd trespassed again and painted rude words all over my shed. I immediately called the police and showed them the fresh footage. With concrete evidence of criminal mischief and harassment, they finally took Linda in for questioning. Turns out this wasn't her first rodeo either. The station had a thick file on past complaints. The officers figured it was best to keep her detained until her hearing. Good riddance, I thought. One weekend of peace and quiet was well worth the hassle. The day in court finally came around. I was nervous, but ready to get this circus show over with. Linda refused a public defender and decided to represent herself. Big mistake. Within minutes of rambling accusations, the judge had clearly had enough of her nonsense. I took the stand and calmly explained the timeline of events, even providing copies of the camera recordings. Linda tried interrupting, shouting, I doctored the so-called evidence. The judge wasn't having it. After I finished my statement, he turned to Linda. "Ma'am, you are hereby ordered to stay at least 100 yards away from the plaintiff at all times. If you violate this order or engage in any further harassment, you will face serious criminal charges. Do I make myself clear?" The look on her smug face as the gavel came down was priceless. Stupid woman got exactly what was coming to her. Now I can finally relax in my home without having to watch over my shoulder. Who knows, maybe I'll keep the cameras up just in case Linda tries to pull another stupid stunt. Either way, I'm just glad to have that psychotic neighbor out of my hair for good. Some folks just can't accept when they're in the wrong. The next one is a pro-revenge story. I was desperate to join a new job after my husband and I were both laid off last year. When I was offered a new role, I knew it would be a step down from what I was doing, but the manager and the team seemed great, and that part has not changed. However, since my manager Gary was so busy, he basically offloaded me to another manager, Jane. I was supposed to be the connection point between my team and Jane, but it quickly became Jane micromanaging me. She would ask me to work through lunch, move and cancel vacation days, call at 11 p.m. on weekends, and order me around on phone calls. She also made nasty comments about my weight and said I was big for my race. The list of personal slights was so long that it filled 3 pages. I would talk back to her, and she did not like that, and that provoked her more. I only stayed because we needed to pay the bills. Finally, I had a mental breakdown on a Friday afternoon after she yelled at me for something trivial about scheduling a meeting without including someone from her team whom I didn't know about. I was dealing with a family tragedy and couldn't take it anymore. I told Gary about the situation with Jane, and he was sympathetic and not at all surprised, considering half her team quit. He immediately offered to move me to a different team under him. I was thrilled. Well, turns out going to the new team didn't help. Jane continued to order me around from afar. When I ignored her emails, she came to my desk one day and started loudly talking about how I am not qualified for this role. Gary overheard and finally told her off, but the verbal abuse did not stop. After 2 months there, I abruptly wrote my resignation letter, stapled the list of Jane's offensive comments, and CC'd everyone. Gary offered a bunch of accommodations to try to keep me, but seeing how she was still provoking from afar, I said the only way for me to stay would be for her to go, and he did not have the authority to let her go. Her manager was in a different country, and despite several HR complaints from at least 5 people, nothing was done, so I left, loudly, and without shame, telling everyone exactly why I was leaving. Times were very bad for 3 months. There were nights we would eat slices of bread just so we could pay the mortgage and emergency expenses from a health crisis and a funeral. Even after he found a job, we were still catching up on bills and still are. I spent months applying for 5, 10 roles per day, sometimes over 20. Last month, I saw a public memo about a big shot from a former company joining the company I just left. I used to work with this guy closely and texted him "Congrats! Let me know if you need any insights on the new place." We had a quick call where I told him some ins and outs where I thought they could innovate. After this call, he asked me to join the team as his chief of staff. I accepted. Imagine Jane's shock when we had our first all-hands call. All the VPs and above were asked to welcome the new big shot in a giant conference room. In the big shot speech, he breezed over the fact that I'll be his chief of staff, along with a few key names. I now sat 2 levels above Jane, and apparently, within the 3 months I was not there, the other half of her team turned over. Every single person left. Gary was excited for me and said all nice things. However, Jane took the classless route and sent the big shot an email about how I'm an unqualified idiot, that I used to work for her, how I tried to get her fired, and that she suspects I lied to get ahead. She didn't even try to be fake nice. The big shot forwarded me her email and asked what this was about. I was so nervous and excited. Little did Jane know, I was a director at the big shot's competitor company and was already a level above her, so 2 levels isn't a big leap, and I worked with him for 5 years. I had an hour-long call with the big shot and told him she was bad for the company culture and was a nasty person in general. The evidence he needed was Gary confirming that her whole team has turned over, my prior resignation letter, which was still sitting on my desktop when I logged in upon return, and a few other nasty emails she sent to her recent staff, which they were happy to share with us. The big shot fired Jane on Friday. The next one is a petty revenge story. Around 5 years ago, when I was in university, I worked at a local supermarket, a big chain but in a small city, as a cashier to be somewhat financially stable. I didn't need this money to get by as I still lived with my dad, but it was always nice being a tad bit more independent. Anyways, I was scheduled as the main cashier on the day before Christmas. Main cashier, as in occupying the only register with access to cigarettes and liquor. Where I worked, these things were locked up and had to be opened by the cashier. So basically the cash register with by far the most people to work through. Being the day before Christmas, I already knew this shift was going to be an absolute nightmare. It was supposed to be from 12 p.m. to 10 p.m. So on this beautifully already doomed Saturday before Christmas, I came in around 15 minutes early, got into my work clothes, and went to the boss's office where we would get our registers for our shift. There was nobody in the office besides our lovely deputy manager. She was the typical Karen. Even the hairstyle was on point with a pink strand in her blonde hair. She can only be described as the most unpleasant person to work with, ever. She was always chewing out the low-paid workers, screamed at customers and workers alike. Only when the managing director was in would she act like an angel on earth. Back to this fateful day. I got into the office, kindly said hello, and wanted to grab my register. Before I could do so, the following conversation happened. DS, devil spawn, me, DS. Before you go to your register, move your fat ass over to the beverage department. Roughly translated, different part of the store for all things liquid. Mr. So-and-so wants to take his lunch break. Me, excuse me? DS. You heard me. Now get going, fat ass. Me, good luck today. And with that, which I am still proud of as a somewhat non-confrontational person, I threw my name tag on her desk, took off my work shirt, revealing my hairy 270 pounds chest and a totally sexy undershirt, and placed it next to her. After that, I proceeded to walk straight through the store to my car and drove home. When I got home, I had already received 10 calls from her, none of which I answered. Then I went to work and sent in my resignation. Not directly to the store where I worked, but to the big office, you know. I made sure to let them know why I was quitting in detail and how this person usually treated staff. I quickly received a nice letter letting me know that they received mine and that further actions will be taken regarding DS. I still had some friends in that store who informed me about a week later that upper management paid a visit and interviewed plenty of people. I'm sure you can figure out how that went. Apparently, after all of that, the managing director gave her two options: quit and work somewhere else, or give up her position as a deputy manager and keep working at the store as a normal worker. To this day, DS is working the register and occasionally cleans the facility. After all, the store is the only one anywhere close to where she lives. Oh, and by the way, she had to cover the entirety of my Christmas shift. Felt good. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Back around 1970, I was stationed at Pearl Harbor in a submarine-based weapons shop in the U.S. Navy. The shop had its own calibration lab, which I, as an enlisted non-commissioned officer, managed. We were all on a 6-day duty rotation, which meant I had to be on duty in the shop for 24 hours straight, regardless of the weather, weekends, or anything else that might arise once every 6 days. On this particular Saturday afternoon and evening, I was there on my 24-hour duty day. As luck would have it, my shop commanding officer was celebrating his promotion to Lieutenant JG. Consequently, I was assigned to help set up for the party, which would take place in a large equipment bay, perhaps 50 feet by 100 feet. The cement floor had to be mopped, waxed, and polished, tables set up, etc. Since the shop's PA system equipment was located in my calibration lab, one part of my duties was to plug it into a local radio station playing appropriate music. After completing the rest of the setup work, as a finishing touch, I set up the PA system and tuned it to an easy listening radio station suitable for senior officers and their wives. Then, I made myself suitably socially invisible for the duration of the party, alone in my lab, as the party commenced. A little later on, I found myself in the presence of the said commanding officer, who ordered me to find a somewhat livelier and hipper radio station. I was more than happy to comply. I tuned the radio to the local hippie FM station. Remember, it's 1970, where the DJs often fell asleep or passed out between songs due to certain recreational substances. However, they did play lively music like Santana, Janis Joplin, Led Zeppelin, etc. To emphasize this instance of mischievous compliance, I then called the radio station, KPOI, whose call letters will forever be etched in my memory, and requested that they play the national anthem by Jimi Hendrix. I peeked out of my lab just in time to see a group of naval officers trying to decide whether to stand at attention and salute or come after me with their ceremonial sabers. Cooler heads prevailed, and I was simply asked to find a more suitable station. Later on, I had a one-on-one with my commanding officer about mischievous compliance, during which I feigned complete astonishment that things went so wrong. The next one is an entitled People story. This happened last year, but I still can't believe it. My partner and I were taking a cross-country flight on a budget airline during the holidays. The day before the scheduled flight, we were involved in a car accident where our car was T-boned in an intersection. My partner was physically fine, obviously a little rattled mentally, but I sustained a fractured collarbone and a torn tendon in my ankle. We were both far from home visiting family, but staying long enough to heal wasn't an option, and I decided I just wanted to make it home. We called the airline ahead of time to request a wheelchair and early boarding due to my injuries. My ankle was the size of a softball and in a bandage. I could not put weight on it. Also had my arm in a sling due to the collarbone break. Crutches were not an option because of this. As you can imagine, flying cross-country like this was already a nightmare. The airline and airports were great. This was a super budget airline, so seats are automatically assigned at the gate unless you pay ahead of time to choose. Because of the situation, we had specific seats assigned towards the front of the plane and on the aisle. I had the aisle, my partner had the middle. We board pretty much before everyone else and go to our assigned seats. I was in a wheelchair the whole way until we crossed the threshold to the plane. Everyone waiting at the gate or lined up to board after us could see this. The next group called to board directly after us were families with young children. As the families file into the plane, a woman and two very young children sit down in the row across from us. A man says he has the window seat in our row, so I slowly hobble up and out of the way with much help from my partner, and he takes his seat. Everyone else on the flight boards. This was a full plane. The woman across from us is struggling with the young kids, and the guy in the window seat is clearly the father trying to talk to her. This is where the problem starts. We are waiting at the gate for the runway to clear when this man turns to my partner, points to the woman and kids across the aisle and says, "That's my family, change seats so I can sit with them." Please keep in mind I am in the aisle seat, the one he wants, with my arm in a sling, my ankle fully wrapped up and clearly swollen, leg extended into the aisle. Again, budget airline, these rows have no legroom, so I needed the aisle for my leg due to swelling, etc., and for mobility in case I needed to go to the restroom. I am looking and feeling like I was hit by a truck, because I literally was. 16 hours ago. My partner looks at him, utterly confused as to how this man doesn't understand the situation, and says, No dude, she needs that seat." Dadman looks immediately frustrated, points again at his family, and says, "No, look, that is my family, change seats with me so we can sit together." My partner just says no again and motions toward my obviously broken body and tells Dadman we are assigned these seats and are not going to change. The dude looks like he wants to argue, but my partner is a bigger guy, and while he's the nicest person ever, he can be intimidating if he wants to be. I've never seen him be aggressive toward anyone, but when he looked back at me, I could tell by the look in his eyes that he was close to decking this guy. Dadman dials back a tad, sighs the most obnoxious, exasperated sigh I have ever heard an adult make, and rolls his eyes. He immediately flags over a flight attendant to make his case, but she reiterated that these were our seats. He tried to get her to move his whole family together elsewhere, but it was a full flight. She checked if I was okay with my seat and left. I still can't get over the entitlement of this man who could have paid like $20 to choose his family's seats ahead of time, expecting a clearly injured person to move to accommodate him, and being pissed when we said no. Oh, and he totally threw us dirty looks and made it very clear of his displeasure the entire rest of the flight. The next one is an entitled parent's story. About a year ago, I ended up changing jobs to move into a higher position. I went from a team leader at my old place to a supervisor at my new one, and so far it's been so much better with very few difficult encounters, until recently. In our shop near the front door, we have a Tango Ice Blast slushy machine. We keep all our cups for the said machine behind the till. It's normally pretty popular on hot days, and they can sell quite fast, but we tend to keep the cups and lids stocked up pretty well. The straws, however, are a different matter. Thanks to our other drinks machine being right next to the Ice Blast machine, and both requiring straws, we just keep them in a box between the two. However, a lot of people will take multiple straws when they buy one drink, so we run out pretty fast. This is going somewhere, I promise. A customer, hereby named ED or entitled Dad, came in today with his daughter and did his shopping. He asked a few times where the cups were for the Tango machine. We explained they were behind the counter and you pay for them before you make the slushie. Eventually he comes to the till and pays for a regular cup. He hands it to his daughter and she runs off to pour the drink while he packs his shopping. He walks to meet her, and we eventually see him begin opening the drawers and doors on the front of the machine, where the gas canister and flavor syrup are kept. We tell him to leave them alone, and he just screams back, "You've no ducking straws." I notice that he's right and ask one of the staff on the shop floor to go run upstairs and get another box. She does, but right away we see ED getting impatient. "Where the duck are the straws? I've got to get my daughter to swimming." I tell him it will just be a minute, as my colleague has gone to get some. I begin serving the next customer, and therefore don't notice the ED open the drawers again. He grabs one of the syrup holders, basically big boxes full of thick, runny syrup, attached to a hose with a special connector, and he yanks it out of the machine. This caused the plastic connector that was attached to the box to rip off and made syrup fly everywhere. He, his daughter, and the machines were covered. He screams at us, asking how we could be so stupid to keep all this sticky stuff in a box, and explains he was looking for the straws. I don't get to say anything before he grabs his kid, gives us the finger, and storms off. Without his straw, it took like an hour and a half to clean it all up. My shoes are still sticky. And we still can't use the machine since the connector is broken. Huge loss of profit for us. It was really popular this time of year thanks to the heat. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.